Is MCOC about to meet its end? Hey guys, what's up? It's Katy, and I got some news the other day about some legislation that was introduced about loot boxes and bans on games that prey on children. Now, when I first saw it, I really didn't think too much about it because I had already heard about some states like Hawaii and Washington that had proposed, really vague bills about mobile games and how they earn their money. And, those bills pretty much went nowhere. But after reading the full article and the 18 pages of the proposed bill, I think there may actually be some changes coming to MCOC and other gambling, quote unquote, type games. So before further ado, let's go ahead and dive into this. Now, let's first establish that there is, in fact, a gambling component to MCOC and other loot box games, in my opinion. Now, that's just in my opinion. These games do not consider loot boxes or crystal spinning gambling because their argument is that if you receive something, it's not gambling, whereas traditional gambling games like poker, blackjack, slot machines, those sort of things, there is a much greater chance that you will get nothing for the money you put into it. Now, what you actually receive is a scaling value. Take, for instance, the Cavalier Crystal. It costs what? 200 units, which is about, $7, give or take, if you buy the units from the store. I think Kabam still values, a 3-star crystal at 400 units. I think that might have changed. So basically the argument there is you get at least 400 units worth of value for a 200 unit crystal with a chance of snagging a 5 or 6-star, which is worth what? 10,000, maybe 15,000 units, maybe somewhere along there. So that is how these games like Marvel Contest of Champions, get away with these practices without calling it gambling. But we all know that those of us who can purchase a Cavalier Crystal, a 3-star is essentially worthless. So what I want to do now is take a look at this article that iLack Skills pointed out to me. If you guys don't know who iLack is, he's another YouTuber. He's got a good channel. Go check him out. So the first thing I noticed was this bill was supported by both Democrats and Republicans. So the chances of it of some version of it rather making it through Congress is greater rather than it just being supported by either Democrats or Republicans. So the most interesting thing about this article is that they are not really going specifically after just loot box games, but any pay to win game. So if we look at the second paragraph here, it says, perhaps the most interesting portion of the bill attempts to define so-called pay-to-win mechanics in games. Those are defined broadly here as purchasable content that assists a user in accomplishing any achievement within the game that can otherwise be accomplished without the purchase of such transaction, or which permits a user to continue to access content of the game that had previously been accessible to the user but has been inaccessible after the expiration of a timer or a number of gameplay attempts. So what does this mean? Well, this means that anything you buy with real money that gives you an advantage would be against the law. So could buying energy refills be illegal under this bill? Potentially. This part of the proposed bill would mean a whole lot of games, including Marvel Contest of Champions, would have to find other ways to get revenue. But we will talk about that later on. And so if we scroll down some more, as far as loot boxes are concerned, the Act targets gamers where purchasable in-game content is randomized or partially randomized. This includes games where you purchase one item for the chance to purchase unknown or random items in the future, closing one potential loophole before it even starts. So now this paragraph basically addresses loot boxes and assumes that any random mechanic in the game would be unlawful. So in the most extreme sense, any form of a 5-star crystal would not be allowed under this law, right? Because your chance of getting any champ out of there is completely random. There is really no greater chance to pull a 5-star Colossus versus a 5-star Omega Red. So let's continue scrolling down here. Any games fitting the above definitions would be illegal to publish or sell under the Act, provided those games were shown to be minor-oriented based on guidelines similar to those laid out in COPPA, or that publishers had constructive knowledge that some players were under the age of 18. The FTC and state attorneys general would have authority to enforce the Act via civil penalties, which are fines, and the FTC could be required to release a report on compliance within 2 years of its passage. So basically, it seems that the only workaround for this is to label your game mature and for adults only, since this entirely, or not entirely, this entirety of this bill is to protect children. It's in fact known as the Protecting Children Against Gambling, I believe, or something along those lines. But when reading the bill, they have not made it easy to label just any game mature, and certainly MCOC would not be able to do so. Think about it. It's Marvel Contest of Champions. It's got superheroes in it. So, and Republican Senator Hawley, I think that's how you said his name. He has made an interesting point here, and he says there are very resourceful people, and I'm sure they can design games that don't rely on gambling directed at children in the center of this game. So they are definitely marketing this bill as a protection of children. Now, I know what you are thinking. Kabam and other, games similar to it will find loopholes, but after reading the bill, I think that's actually going to be pretty difficult for them to do. Now, I will put a link to the articles and anything else I show in the description below, but let's go ahead and take a look at the bill real fast. Whoops. All right, let's scroll all the way back up to the top here. There we go. So I'm not going to spend too much time on it because, let's face it, it's 18 pages. It's kind of boring, but there are a few key things in here that I found interesting and, actually took the creators of this bill took their time to make sure companies like Kabam couldn't use loopholes in order to get around it. So let's go ahead and scroll down here to page 2. And this is basically some, definitions of it. So game publishers. It is unlawful for a game publisher to publish a minor-oriented game that includes includes pay-to-win microtransactions or loot boxes, or an update to existing minor-oriented game that would enable pay-to-win microtransactions or loot boxes in such a game. Digital game distributors. It is unlawful for a digital game distributor to distribute a minor-oriented game that includes pay-to-win microtransactions or loot boxes, or an update to an existing minor-oriented game that would enable pay-to-win microtransactions or loot boxes in such a game. So basically what they're saying here is that it is illegal to publish a pay-to-win game and a loot box game, which, I'm sorry, but Marvel Contest of Champions, it is both. So if we look at digital game distributors, it is unlawful for a digital game distributor to distribute an interactive digital entertainment product that is not a minor-oriented game or an update to such a product if such a product or update contains pay-to-win microtransactions or loot boxes and the distribution has a constructive knowledge that any of its users are under the age of 18. Okay. So this is basically closing the loophole of a game saying, well, we are for adults knowingly that people under the age of 18 are playing. It closes that loophole out. So if we scroll down here, where are we at here? To page 5, there we go. The minor-oriented game. The term minor-oriented game means an interactive digital entertainment product for which the target audience is individuals under the age of 18, as may be demonstrated by the subject matter of the product, the visual content of the product, excuse me, the music or audio content of the product, the use of animated characters or activities that appeal to individuals under the age of under the age of 18, the age of characters or models in the product, the presence in the product of celebrities who are under the age of 18, or celebrities who appeal to individuals under the age of 18. So basically, playing a bunch of cartoon superhero characters cannot be argued, well, MCOC is for adults by Kabam, even if they tried to give it a mature rating. Not gonna happen. I mean, it's a bunch of superheroes. Let's face it. Okay, so let's scroll down here to the pay to win microtransactions. So here is why they are calling it pay to win microtransactions. Is it eases a user progression through content. 30% boost. I mean, energy refills could, basically fall under this, even if you can get them in the game, which we can. Assists a user in accomplishing an achievement within the game that can otherwise be accomplished without the purchase of such transactions. This one is kind of vague and could mean so many things. Crystal shards, boosts, units, could mean any of them. Permits a user to continue to access content through the game that had previously been accessible to the user but has been made inaccessible after the expiration of a timer or number of gameplay attempts. Now, this one is interesting. Those quests that Kabam loves to give us where, you cannot restart may actually be illegal under this one. An example of this could be the Merc missions when Domino was released last year. Now, I know there have been plenty of people who have jumped into a difficulty level that they just couldn't complete, had to use items to get through, or they just, had to back out and try again the next day. Even those quests where you get one ticket per day, and once you go in, you've used that ticket and you're done. If you back out, that's it. Too bad, so sad. You can't go back in. I can't quite remember the name of that quest, but you had the ticket, and if you failed, that was it. Too bad, you're done. Either use units and get through it, use items and get through it, but there was no backing out and restarting. So they address difficulty modes. Cosmetic items, purchasing additional game content. So no more OG Deadpool Arena for only people that, got it at the start of the game, it seems. Not like Kabam has done that one in a few years. But they do go through a lot of stuff about pay to win and microtransactions that could become illegal if this bill were to pass in the US as it is in its current form. So let's go ahead and scroll way down here, jump down here to some stuff about what a loot box is. So the term loot box means an add-on transaction to an interactive digital entertainment product that is randomized or partially randomized and allows the user to make one or more additional add-on transactions. So honestly, this basically describes a crystal in MCOC. So let's go ahead and take a look at this enforcement. Let's just look at it briefly. We won't go into too much about it, but let's see. Where are we at? Oh, sorry about that, guys. Okay. So violations. So you'll get a violation. Now, remember, the way they're talking about this here is each transaction is one violation and it's separate. So there's potentially not going to be any warning when a civil penalty is issued. Now, remind you, a civil penalty is a fine that the developers could be faced, or the owners of the company, whatever. So Kabam. So they may not even get a warning. They may just get slapped with a fine right out the gate. And they could be slapped with a civil penalty. Now, it doesn't go into detail about how much the civil penalty is, but I mean, they would be slapped with it. Now, they could be, Kabam, for example, could be slapped with a civil penalty anytime someone purchases a crystal. Each time a crystal is purchased, that is considered a separate violation. So think about how many times we hoard crystals, right? I mean, especially PHCs, man, I hoard onto those like crazy. So let's go ahead and take a look at compliance, because this is really what's important, is how are our companies going to deal with it. So no later than 2 years after the date of the enactment of this act, the commission shall submit to each committee of Congress with jurisdiction over the commission a report on the actions taken by the game publishers and other federal and state laws relating to pay-to-win microtransactions and loot boxes. So basically what this is saying is companies have at least 2 years, well, not at least, they have 2 years, if the bill is passed, to start complying with the new law and basically get their shit together. So if this bill were to become a law, companies like Kabam have 2 years to start trying to figure stuff out. So, and then they go on to talk about, the study of effect of pay-to-win microtransactions and loot boxes, basically like psychological effects and that sort of thing. So I'm not going to go into much detail about it. I will post a link to the bill if you want to take a look at it, in the description below. So what are my final thoughts having read over this bill and, some articles involved with it? Well, first, if they are to pass this bill and make it a law, as the bill stands now, what does this mean for Kabam and the future of Contest of Champions? Well, Kabam could have actually a few options. Now, they could cut MCOC entirely from the American market, but there are problems with that, including revenue loss. And actually, too, when bills like this come up, other countries start adopting them as well. So they would essentially be trying to outrun a problem that they may never be willing or be able to outrun. I mean, especially the EU, they love this kind of stuff. Now, the second thing that Kabam could do is revamp the game in such a way that it would be totally unrecognizable. Kabam would have to then change the entire crystal system, so everything would have to be earned in game with none, zero, no exceptions. They would probably have to start, selling champions to the consumer, i.e. players, which would totally change the landscape of this game and change it more of to a future fight game. Now, the problem with selling champs is that they would have to sell every champ for the same price, because you can't sell Omega Red for $100 and Hulkbuster for a nickel, because then you are violating the pay to win. Now, they would also then need a steady revenue coming in. So Kabam would start probably selling a subscription service for, everyone who plays, much like MMOs do. Now, I'm guessing it would probably be around $5 a month, but it's Kabam, so you never really know. A one-time purchase of this game, which I know you're thinking, well, they could just do a one-time purchase, right? But no, because that wouldn't keep the game updated monthly. They would need a steady monthly income in order to keep the updates each month. There are probably some other things that I'm not really thinking of, but please feel free to let me know in the comments below how you think Kabam would handle this if it were to pass. So speaking of this bill getting passed, do I think it'll get passed? I actually feel like it's highly unlikely it will get passed in the state that it is in now. If it were to, it would be the most restrictive bill that I have seen regarding gaming. Now, actually, Belgium and the Netherlands, they did pass some loot box bans. And here's an article here that goes over it. But Belgium and the Netherlands, they actually targeted specific games like Overwatch and FIFA. Now, I don't think this bill will pass because it's pretty far-fetched as it stands. I've heard people complaining, they've been complaining about it and comparing it to things similar to net neutrality. But the thing with the net neutrality debate is people thought net neutrality would never be overturned because, just like this bill, big tech companies like Apple, Google, YouTube, they were all against it. However, dissimilar to this, net neutrality, there were big companies on the other side pushing for its demise. I mean, you had companies like Time Warner, Verizon, AT&T, and huge media companies that were pushing against net neutrality. So, but in all honesty, with this bill, there is only big money against it. You've got Google, pretty much every gaming company, the ESRB, which is the rating company, they're all against it because they would feel like they would lose a lot of money, and they're probably right if it were to pass. There is really no big money pushing for this bill. And I mean, let's face it, some mom in Iowa whose kid who's addicted to the game really is a good account. Sorry, Karen. So the idea behind this bill, actually, what I think, is to get these gaming companies like Google and Apple to be afraid and to start lobbying money for senators to kill this bill. I actually think it's kind of like a legalized extortion scheme, but that's just my opinion. Maybe some really watered down version of this bill will get passed and, will get through the Senate, the House, and to the president's desk, but I highly doubt it will be this form of the bill. But then again, I could be wrong. Only time will tell. But what do you guys think? Do you think this bill will become law? How do you think Kabam is going to react to it? What do you think Apple and Google are going to do about it? Do you think President Trump will sign this bill? Let me know in the comments below and let's discuss. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching. If you guys liked what you saw and you want to see more, please remember to like and subscribe, follow me on Instagram and Twitter, and hit me up in the Discord chat. Thanks, guys. Bye.